Yo, my people. Today I have 8 building tips to share with you to help you become a better Bloxburg builder. This video has been requested quite a bit, so I thought I would make it for you. The reason that I've been a little bit hesitant to make this video is because pretty much all of my building tips are summed up in the very first 3 that I'm gonna give you, and the other 5 pretty much follow from those 3, or you can get them from those 3 if that makes sense. The very first tip is to watch other people on YouTube. If you watch other Bloxburg builders building in videos, like Krita, for example, he builds all the time, you will pick up on different things that make your builds better or ways that you do specific things. And then it's just easier to go and do those things yourself. And this is whether you know how to build it all or you don't know how to build. Sometimes you literally learn the process of it, like the literal steps, just from watching someone do it. But if you already know how to build, there might be like little tips and tricks and hacks that you see other people do in their videos that you may not have known about, but then you see it and it's like, oh, cool, I didn't know about that, and now let me go and do that too. The people I love to watch are Krita. I also love Simply Bubbly. She's so close to 400k subscribers, so go subscribe to her if you haven't. I love Seashell. I love Azria, even though she hasn't really posted in forever. There's also people like Kachunky, and there's smaller YouTubers like Talia Ray and Lavendoria. And honestly, the list could go on. There's so many Bloxburg builders. You know, you could watch speed builds as well. All the people I listed don't usually do speed builds, I don't think. But for me, I love watching like entertaining build videos, and those are also very helpful. But speed builds will literally show you exactly what the person is doing, so that probably would be more helpful also. My next tip is to use inspo. Sometimes you can get stuck in the rut of kind of just building a plain, boring kitchen or living room or house, even a whole house. But when you use inspo, it can help you see ideas that you wouldn't have thought of on your own. For example, like a room like this, like sometimes I forget that I can do cool things like a cute little arch. Something as simple as that can really change your whole build. And also, if you are just learning to build, using inspo can be great because then you don't have to come up with the idea yourself. You know what I mean? You find a picture and you try to recreate it. That alone helps you learn the process of building and making a build look good. And then it's easier to then go and do your own thing later. Some great places to find inspo include Pinterest, like what you see here. There's also Instagram. This right here is a Sims build, but I do also follow some Bloxburg builders. Let me see if I can find one in here. Here's one right here. There's also Twitter. Even watching shows or movies can give you inspo sometimes, because you'll see something in a movie and it'll be like, oh my gosh, I would love to build that. Or even reading a book can do that sometimes, because it'll have the description and it'll be like, I want to build something just like that. And then you can. And one of the best places to get inspo is just from real life. If you go on a trip or you just go around your normal life and look at the buildings around you, sometimes you'll see inspiration that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. For example, this bookshop I built is inspired by the Galveston bookshop, which I saw on my trip to Galveston that I took with my family last month. And this is one of my favorite builds now. So imagine just the things you could build one day. And something that comes with this is just exposing yourself to inspiration. So yes, you can go and find inspiration in these places, but if you actually deliberately follow certain accounts, or you make a Pinterest board and you go on Pinterest every once in a while looking for houses, even when you're not about to build, then you will just allow yourself to be inspired even when you're not expecting to be. Then you're kind of filling your brain with these ideas, and when you do go to build, you have all these ideas already because they've been exposed to you all the time. Building tip number 3 is to just trust the process, or in other words, it takes time. The easiest way to explain this is that a good house cannot be built in 10 minutes. Most likely. I mean, some people are very skilled in that way, but I am not. Most likely you're not either. Most people would not be. But my point is don't expect a good house to happen even in an hour. A lot of the times in my experience, I'll start building and I absolutely hate the build, but if I just keep pushing through and keep working on it, it gets better. So if you're building and you're just like, this house is terrible, just keep going. Sure, maybe it's terrible now, but it probably just still needs work. So just keep working on it. And when I say a good build can't be done in 10 minutes, this was my 10-minute build battle house after 10 minutes. And then this is it now that I spent 5 hours working on it after those initial 10 minutes. Literally, this took me hours to make it look this good, and it's a small house. And I didn't even get decals in that time. So what does that tell you? Tip number 4 is just pillars and wall trim. Let me tell you, pillars and wall trim are everything when it comes to building, especially for the exterior. Pillars will just add so much life to a build. I didn't build this house, some of you actually did, and you can see they used pillars on the outside. They also used wall trim. Let me go into build mode and show you the difference of what this would look like without these pillars here. I only took away some, but look at the difference there. It doesn't look nearly as good. It's just empty. I put them back, so we're good. We're not gonna lose that, thankfully. Even inside, you can see that they used some trim and some pillars in here, and it would look so much more empty and like not as well defined without the pillars and the wall trim. And you may have a build that doesn't need that, and that's okay. But the point is that sometimes when you're looking at a build and it's like, this is really not that great, it just needs that extra little boost of pillars and wall trim, or one of those two. Tip number 5 is just to use decals. And I don't just mean this in like pictures that you put on the wall and paintings and things like that. I mean this as use them for wall trim, for example, or backsplash or something like that. When you use decals, you can do so much more with your house. Like this backsplash wouldn't be possible without a decal. And just in the same way, you can use a decal for wallpaper essentially. So if you don't like the material options or the color options, then you can just use a decal and do your own thing. And with these new transparent decals that we have in the game that look like this, you can do so many awesome things with gardening. For example, I have these awesome transparent bushes that I put on my little toddler playhouse here, and people make like full-on trees and like more full bushes with that decal. Tip number 6 is to have a color scheme. It can be really good to have a color scheme. For instance, for this house, my main color scheme was cocoa, buttermilk, fog, seashell, and probably linen. Oh, and then I also used pastel violet as well. But that can just make the whole build be very cohesive and just look nice. And you can kind of see that in this build right here and see how I use those colors. But sometimes it's okay to not really have a color scheme. If you want something to look a little bit more realistic, you don't really need to have one. You just kind of do whatever, just like a normal house. Unless you have a Pinterest home, then I'm jealous of you. And this may not be the perfect house to show you with, but actually maybe it is. When it comes to gardening, I tend to use different green colors. Like I'll use 2 or 3 because when you're out in nature, things that are green aren't all the exact same green color. So it looks a little bit more realistic and just nicer when you have different ones. Like right here, you can see these 2 are different colors. And for me, my favorite are usually laurel green and moss, but I've started using some slime green as well. And sometimes even earth green is really nice too. But I would just pick 2 or 3 different greens when it comes to gardening outside and using those greens. Tip number 7 is just that some things are not obvious, and that just means you have to think outside of the box. So for instance, I come from building in The Sims. That's what I started building in, and then I came to Bloxburg a while later. And in Sims, they literally have like porches and railings and things like that, but we don't have that in Bloxburg. So to make a porch like this, you have to use a roof in the basement, or at least that's what I did. And also for these steps, I did the same thing. And then to make the railing, I used some pillars and resized them. And I also used some basic shapes for the top wooden part. And then I used structurals for this railing right here. So let me show you exactly how I did that so you actually understand if you don't know this already. So in build, you go to roofs and then you get a flat roof and you go into your basement. So currently we're on the basement level, but you don't really see that. If I take off the roof right here, you will see that, but we want to see it from here. And then I would just press T so that I can place it myself and it's not manually placed. And I click here, and then click here, and that is not a square, but it can show you the idea anyway. And then I would just raise it like this, and that is how I essentially made that. And then I just recolor it. The good thing with Bloxburg is that even when you aren't expressly given something, there are usually ways to work around it just like that, or you can always make things yourself with basic shapes. Last but not least, tip number 8 is to use the tools you are given. So with this, I mainly mean like the scaling tool and the copying tool and the coloring tool. So right here, we have the scale tool. You can also hit V on your keyboard, and then that allows you to resize objects like this. this. And you can see here how with these plants, they're all the same plant, but I have them all different sizes, and that just looks much more natural rather than having things that are exactly the same just perfectly copied and pasted, because then it just looks unnatural and too perfect. Unless that's what you're going for, then it's good to have variety. And then when it comes to the copy tool, which is down here, you can also hit C on your keyboard for that. That is more just convenience for you, because for instance, yes, I have these different sized over here, but I can make a few different size ones and then copy it and place it in different places. And then I can go ahead and copy this smaller one, and then it's still different sized, but I didn't have to resize it each and every time. And then when it comes to the coloring tool, which you can see down here, it looks like a little painter's palette. You can also hit the F key on your keyboard to get there too. With that, it's just good because you can change the color of things, because you don't always want things to be the default color. But I think most important is material. Sometimes changing the material of something can make it look 1,000 times different. For example, this contemporary armchair is not one that I normally use, but I always see when I tour my subscribers' houses that they use this and they just color it and change the materials, and it looks so different. Like, I never usually would think about doing this. For instance, with this chair, I can make it lily white, and then even for the wood, if I were to change that wood to like this pattern, this material right here, that makes a world of a difference. It looks like a whole different chair. Those are all the Bloxburg building tips I have to share with you today. I hope something in there was helpful for you. Happy building, and I will see you next time. Love you all so much. Bye!